abolitionist, both abolitionist theories and practices. The personal is political. There is a deep relationality that links struggles against institutions and struggles to reinvent our personal lives and recraft ourselves. We know, for example, that we replicate the structures of retributive justice oftentimes in our own emotional responses. Someone attacks us, verbally or otherwise, our response is what? A counter-attack. The retributive impulses of the state are inscribed in our very emotional responses. The political reproduces itself through the personal. This is a feminist insight. A Marxist-inflected fiction could not have grown to almost 2.5 million people in this country without our implicit assent. And we don't even acknowledge the fact that psychiatric institutions are often an important part of the prison-industrial complex, nor do we acknowledge the intersection of the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the prison industrial complex.
Come on now.
During the Reagan-Bush era and during the Clinton era, we would not be confronting such a behemoth today. We have had to unlearn a great deal over the course of the last few decades. We have had to try to unlearn racism, and not only white people.
Come on.
People of color have had to unlearn the assumption that racism is individual, that it's primarily a question of individual attitudes that can be dealt with through sensitivity training. You remember Don Imus called the Rutgers women's basketball team nappy-headed hoes about 5 years ago. 5 years later, he's rehabilitated. But of course, this doesn't compensate for the fact that Troy Davis is dead, his life claimed by the most racist of all of our institutions, capital punishment. No amount of psychological therapy or group training can effectively address racism in this country unless we also begin to dismantle the structures of racism. They constitute the new Jim Crow, but also much more. As the linchpins of the prison industrial complex, they represent the increasing profitability of punishment. They represent the increasingly global strategy of dealing with populations of people of color and immigrant populations from the countries of the global south as surplus populations, as disposable populations. Put them all in a vast garbage bin. Add some sophisticated electronic technology to control them and let them languish there. And in the meantime, create the ideological illusion that the surrounding society is safer and more free because the dangerous black people and Latinos and Native Americans and the dangerous Asians and the dangerous white people and of course the dangerous Muslims are locked up. And in the meantime, corporations profit and poor communities.
Come on now.
Healthcare suffers. If punishment can be profitable, then certainly healthcare should be profitable too. This is absolutely outrageous. It is outrageous. It is also outrageous that the state of Israel uses the carceral technologies developed in relation to U.S. prisons not only to control the more than 8,000 Palestinian political prisoners in Israel, but also to control the Palestinian population.
Come on now.
These carceral technologies, for example, the separation wall, which reminds us of the border wall, the U.S.-Mexico border wall. The separation wall and other partial technologies are the material constructs of Israeli apartheid. G4S, you know the organization, the corporation G4S, which profits from the incarceration and the torturing of Palestinian prisoners. It has a subsidiary called G4S Secure Solutions, which was formerly known as Wackenhut. And just recently, a subsidiary of that corporation, Geo Group, which is a private prison company, attempted to claim naming rights at Florida Atlantic University by donating something like $6 million, right? And the students rose up. They said that our football stadium will not bear the name of a private prison corporation. From California or Texas or Illinois to Israel and occupied Palestine and then back to Florida. But we should not have allowed this to happen. We should not have allowed this to happen over the last 3 decades. And we cannot allow it to continue today. And let me say that I really love the new generations of young students and workers. 2 generations removed from my own. They say sometimes revolution skips a generation. But that skip generation has also worked hard. Those of you who are in your 40s. And if you had done the work that you did, then it would not be possible for the younger generation to emerge.
Right.
And what I like most about the younger generation is that they are truly informed by feminism, even if they don't know it, or even if they don't admit it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are informed by anti-racist struggles. They are not infected with the emotionally damaging homophobia which has been with us for so long. And they're taking the lead in challenging transphobia along with racism and Islamophobia.
Come on.
So I like working with young people because they allow me to imagine what it is like not to be so totally overburdened with decades of oppressive ideology. Now, I just have a couple more things to say. I know I'm over my time, and I apologize.
It's all right.
I just have one more page of notes. And so let me say that marriage equality is more and more acceptable precisely because of young people. But many of these young people also remind us that we have to challenge the assimilationist logic.
Come on.
That once outsiders are allowed to move into the circle of the bourgeois heteropatriarchal institution of marriage, that the struggle is
Come on.
The story of the interrelationships between feminism and abolition has no appropriate end. And with this conversation, we have just begun to explore a few of its dimensions. But if I have not come to the end of the story, I've certainly come to the end of my time. So I want to let Asati Shakur have the last word tonight. So.
Right.
At this moment, she wrote a few years ago, I am not so concerned about myself. Everybody has to die sometime, and all I want is to go with dignity. I am more concerned about the growing poverty, the growing despair that is rife in America.
Yes.
I am more concerned about our younger generations who represent our future. I am more concerned about the rise of the prison-industrial complex that is turning our people into slaves again. I am more concerned about the repression, the police brutality, violence, the rising wave of racism that makes up the political landscape of the U.S. today. Our young people deserve a future, and I consider it the mandate of my ancestors to be a part of the struggle to ensure that they have one. Thank you very much.
It's time for short questions. If you have a question, line up right here. Tracy, stand up. Line up right there, and we will take your short question. And there is a mic also in the back. See, hand up. So you can line up back there if you have a question.
My name is Michelle Vecchiani. I'm at the law school. Thank you very much for coming here. To give my question some context, a lot of transgender women in New York City are arrested simply for having a condom. The condom is used as the evidence for soliciting prostitution. Given all the progress that we've made with the lesbian gay community, oftentimes we forget the T and LGBT. Can you speak on the relationship between granting or socially elevating a portion of a group and its relationship to this categorizing that you speak of and creating a margin within the margin?
Okay, I have a really succinct response to your question, because I think you eloquently laid out the issue with your question. And it was Dr. Martin Luther King who said that justice is indivisible, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we should always rely on that.
Oh my God! What her life is going to be like in 20 years.
You know, I'm glad you asked me that question. Because I actually did not make the movie, and people keep saying, your movie. The documentary was made by a woman whose name is Shala Lynch.
Yes.
And I think, well, there are a couple of things that I think that are really important. First of all, she did amazing archival research. And I don't know if you know what archival research is. But she looked for a lot of old film from 40 years ago and found things that I had never seen before. So I learned a lot from seeing that film. But I think what was most important about about the film was that it tells the story of a movement. I guess it tells my story, part of my story as well. But what's most important to me is that it tells the story of a movement that was victorious, that won against the most insurmountable odds. Even though I was innocent, I was up against some of the most repressive forces that we've ever witnessed in the entire history of the U.S. I'm talking about, and maybe you'll learn something later about Richard Nixon. He was the president. Ronald Reagan was the governor of California where the trial took place. And J. Edgar Hoover, whom you'll learn about as well, was the head of the FBI. And against that unholy triumvirate, nobody thought it was possible to win. But people came together all over the country. There were huge numbers of people in Chicago. And let me say thank you 40 years later to all of the Chicagoans. And people in Africa, in Asia, in all over Latin America, all over Europe, people everywhere. It was an amazing movement. And I was telling somebody that my Pilates instructor. My Pilates instructor was telling me about her experience seeing the film. She went with a friend, but she said to the friend, "Is she gonna get out? Is she gonna get out? Is she gonna get out?" And the friend said, "Well, you see her twice a week." But anyway, thank you so much for the question.
Good evening. As a legal professional, I was wondering if you could provide me with a plan of action to help with prison reform.
Yeah, right? 2 hours.
Well, I may not be able to give you a plan of action. But first of all, I suggest that you develop some relationship to some progressive lawyers organization. And I think there's the National Council of Black Lawyers, and there's the National Lawyers Guild. So I think that's the first thing. And then I would say, so how long have you been a lawyer? Are you studying? Okay, you're in law school. Okay. Learn the law well. Learn it well. But also learn how not to take it so seriously that you let it control everything that you think. So learn also to be critical of everything you encounter. Because the law is one of those problems, particularly in the way that it makes what is ideological appear to be normal.
Come on.
And it seems to me that all of us have to learn how constantly to question and criticize that which appears to be most normal.
Always. Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, that is the answer to so many questions that we would not even know how to ask if we did not engage in that kind of critical thinking, critical engagement with the law. But good luck. And work for justice, work for real justice.
Welcome to Chicago, Ms. Davis. Thank you very much for coming. There's a lot of pressure figuring out the one question to ask your zero, but I think I've come up with it. I do a lot of work with young folks, mainly with the Freedom School we have here in Chicago. this is very frightening to me, but there's a lot of people who have begun to dehumanize gangbangers, and they don't see it as really a problem. What would be some suggestions to really get people to realize that these are people too, and we should care about this?
Yeah, you sound like you're such an intelligent and passionate. I can't really see you. Yeah, why is everybody so far in the back? Yeah, can we move the mic up? Thank you. So you seem like you're precisely the kind of person who can provide that leadership. And Chicago, look, the applause you just got. So the question is, how to develop a movement that is going to shift opinion, about people who are perceived as threats to our security. And it used to be that we thought it was basically, white people. Mm-hmm. And now we know that it's not. So many people have been influenced by the criminalization process, by the assumption that all young Black and Latino men, like Trayvon Martin, right, are violent.
Come on.
And in many ways, that violence is connected to the violence of the state. Why are they gangbangs? Where do they learn that violence works? Or where do they think that they learn that violence is represented as working? This society is so saturated with violence, and why target those who are least likely to be responsible for the production of violence in the society? So that's something that we really have to work on, and it's related very much to the whole idea that decarceration is possible and that abolition of the prison industrial complex is also possible. Good luck with your stuff.
Good evening. I have truly enjoyed you this evening. And you've hit on so many subjects that have to do with the depression and the trauma that we as people of African descent are suffering from. And so, as I think about it, I say, I know the perfect person who can help with the reparation movement, Angela Davis. So what I'm asking you is that I'm involved with an organization called COBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparation. And we feel that there's a healing needed, and so much has been postponed and ignored. And so I'm hoping that you can help us in the movement and give us some advice on how we can push this movement forward, because it would be good for the whole country.
That's absolutely right. And, the ghosts of slavery are still very much with us today, precisely because it has never been possible in the history of this country to come to grips with the damage that slavery did, and to learn how to recognize the extent to which the racism linked to slavery is still very much a part of our lives. Now, reparation. Yeah, let me just get some tea. I'm standing down here because I can't hear. There's a lot of echoes, and the speakers, I think, are in front of me, so I can't hear the questions very well when I stand at the podium. But I've always thought that it would really be wonderful to create some alliances with other communities that are also demanding reparation. You know, what about reparation for the initial genocidal colonization
Come on now.
of this country?
Come on now.
And also develop links with the Japanese American
Come on.
reparation movement. That's what it used to be about. This is one of the reasons I decided to, focus my presentation on trans prisoners, because we have to learn how to expand our sense of community. We have to learn how to work across lines that are designed to separate us, to keep us from knowing each other, from struggling with each other, and from loving each other. I say keep doing the work that you're doing. It's really important, but try to be as expansive as possible. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Davis. My name is Santa Andride. I'm a 15-year-old sophomore at King College Prep. I'm a very huge fan. I'm actually shaking right now. I feel like I'm...
That's okay. That's okay.
But one thing you discussed was norms and how some negative things in society have become norms. And one norm that Chicago knows too well is gun violence. My dear friend and some other people in this room, my friend Kaylin Jones, who is in the balcony, our dear friend Heidi Pendleton, who was gunned down in a park around the corner from our school. Now, we try to pass on this wake-up call that gun violence should not be a norm, but it's been accepted not only by our people, not only by people around us, but also by CPD. It's been considered a problem that they can't solve, that can't be solved. And I'm asking you, what can I do? Because me and my dear friend Kaylin, we try. We consider ourselves the black in conscience of our generation, and we try to wake up our peers, but the wake-up call isn't coming.
And I think we should have a more extended conversation later, because it is complicated. And let me say that you may know that that I was charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy because I was a gun owner in 1970. And I grew up in a family that my father had guns. And it was because they were deemed necessary at that time to protect ourselves from the Ku Klux Klan. And I know the only time those guns came out was when there was word that the Klan was in the neighborhood, or when we thought the Klan was planting bombs or something like that. And I mean, I just want to say that because sometimes people look at the Black Panther Party and the fact that the gun was a symbol of the Black Panther Party, and they think, oh, that's the same as all the guns that are in people's hands today. No, that is not true. The idea then was only self-defense.
Yes.
It was only about self-defense. And it was about defending our right to struggle for freedom and equality and justice. Now, today, there are 300 million guns in the civilian population of the U.S. Nation. That is to say, there are almost as many guns as there are people. Now that is crazy, isn't it? That is bizarre. I think that also has something to do with the fact that the U.S. has the largest prison population in the world.
Yes.
The largest number of guns in the world, the largest prison population in the world, and I think it has something to do with the massive police violence that happens all over the country. Heidi Pendleton, your friend, and I can talk about Oscar Grant and Alan Luther in Oakland, and I can talk about Kimani Gray, who was shot in the back in Brooklyn.
Right.
Now, you know, I think that in this era, we have to say no more guns. We have to talk about removing all guns from the hands of human beings. So, what does that mean? It also means we have to talk about disarming the police.
Amen.
Who like the police don't even know what to do with guns.
Come on.
But I think this is going to be this is an abolitionist struggle, right? So we have to try to imagine a future in which it is not necessary for the police to bear arms. And at the same time, we continue to work towards disarmament. And let me just say, I was kind of upset when the whole debate around gun violence arose, especially in the aftermath of Sandy Hook Elementary School, and I didn't hear anyone mention Trayvon Martin's name.
Right.
I didn't hear brought into that conversation ideas about how to end the racist assaults of police that are happening in Black communities and Latino communities all